My son banned me from his own wedding. No argument, no explanation. Just one message on my phone. Don't come. For hours I stared at that screen, wondering how the boy who once cried for my hugs now wanted me erased from the happiest day of his life. Was I really such an embarrassment? Or was someone whispering lies in his ear? That night, when I'd already decided to stay home, my phone rang again, a trembling voice on the other end. "Mrs. Moore, it's Emma. Please, you have to come. I can't marry him until you know the truth." And just like that, the story changed. From rejection to revelation. From silence to a secret that could destroy everything. What would you do if your own child shut you out but their bride begged you to show up? Tell me in the comments. Would you still go? Subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tae for more family drama stories that break your heart, heal it, and remind you that a mother's love never quits. The morning of the wedding felt colder than it should have. The sky hung low, heavy with clouds, as if even heaven wasn't sure this marriage should begin. I held my small handbag close and took the bus to Maple Grove Chapel. People around me were chatting, dressed in bright clothes and perfumes that reminded me of other people's joy. But I sat there silently, hands folded, heart trembling between fear and faith. Would Daniel be angry if I showed up? Would Emma regret calling me? Or would I finally learn what truth she was so afraid to say over the phone? When the bus stopped in front of the chapel, I could already hear the music, the kind that sounds expensive but feels hollow when your heart is breaking. White ribbons hung from the trees, guests were laughing, photographers were giving orders. It looked like a scene from a movie I wasn't cast in. I walked slowly toward the entrance, my heels clicking on the stone path. A security guard in a black suit stepped forward, blocking me. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said politely. "Can I see your invitation?" I froze. "I'm Daniel Moore's mother." He checked his list. Then, almost too carefully, he said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, your name isn't here." My breath caught. I wanted to disappear, but I stood still, straightened my back, and said, "It must be a mistake. I'll wait here." He hesitated, nodded, and stepped aside just enough for me to see the guests arriving, friends of my son, his co-workers, people I didn't know. They all walked past me with bright smiles, unaware that the woman standing outside, trembling, had once fed the groom with a spoon when he was sick. I watched them greet his bride. Emma was radiant in her white dress, elegant but fragile. When her eyes found me, for a brief second, she froze. Then, she smiled softly and mouthed something I could barely read. "Thank you for coming." But the woman standing next to her, older, perfectly dressed, face tight with control, noticed me too. I didn't know her yet, but I would soon learn her name. Mrs. Hart, Emma's mother. She leaned toward her daughter, whispered something, and Emma's smile faded. Then she turned away, led by her mother into the waiting hall. Minutes passed. Guests entered. Laughter grew louder, and I was still standing outside. The security guard came again, lowering his voice. "Ma'am, I'm really sorry, but I've been told this area is for invited guests only." I took a deep breath. I understand. I didn't cry, not yet. I just stepped aside, toward the small garden by the gate. From there, I could see everything but belong nowhere. A young woman with a clipboard, maybe part of the wedding team, noticed me and whispered to another staff member. I heard fragments. "Who is she?" "Not on the list." Someone said she's his mother. Their eyes glanced at me like I was a problem to be managed. I sat on a stone bench near the gate. My heart was steady now, too steady. The way hearts get when they've been broken too many times. In my bag, I touched the embroidered handkerchief I'd brought for Daniel. He was supposed to keep it in his jacket pocket during the ceremony, for good luck, he'd said when he was 10. He used to believe anything I touched turned lucky. When did that faith die? Suddenly, I heard a voice behind me. "Mrs. Moore?" I turned around. It was Emma's bridesmaid, a young woman with soft brown hair and nervous eyes. She looked around to make sure no one saw her. "Emma asked me to find you," she whispered. "She said you came." "Yes," I said quietly. "They didn't let me in." She bit her lip. "I know. Mrs. Hart told the staff to keep you out, but Emma's insisting you be here before she walks down the aisle." My chest tightened. "Why?" The bridesmaid glanced toward the chapel doors. "Because she found something this morning, and she says it changes everything." Before I could ask, she hurried away, leaving me with those words, "It changes everything." A few minutes later, the guard received a phone call. He nodded, looked embarrassed, and motioned for me to come inside. Please, ma'am, you can enter now. The hallway smelled of roses and fresh polish. Every sound echoed the click of my shoes, the whispers of people who recognized me too late. I could feel their eyes on my back. When I reached the small waiting room near the bridal suite, Emma was there. Her hands trembled as she fixed her veil, her reflection broken by tears. "Mrs. Moore," she said, turning toward me. "I'm so sorry." I shook my head. "Don't be. Just tell me what's happening." She glanced at the door, then handed me a folder, thin, cream-colored, elegant. Inside were a few printed emails. I scanned them quickly and felt my knees weaken. Messages from me to her, but I had never written them. They were cruel, manipulative, full of lies about Emma's family, money, and intentions. Sent from an address that looked almost like mine but wasn't. "They said you warned Daniel not to marry me," she whispered, voice shaking. "That you called me a gold digger." I looked at her in shock. "I know," she said quickly. "I didn't believe it at first, but then your messages started appearing on Daniel's phone too. I thought maybe you hated me." "Who showed you these?" I asked. She swallowed hard. "My mother, she said she was protecting me." The room fell silent except for the distant music beginning to play outside. I stared at those fake messages, realizing someone had built a wall of lies between me and my son, brick by digital brick. I folded the papers gently and said, "Emma, truth always finds a crack to shine through, and today that crack might just be you." She nodded, tears falling. "I'll fix this. Before the ceremony, everyone will know what really happened." In Stame Souther Tangers. Outside, a bell rang, calling the guests to their seats. Emma looked pale but determined. And for the first time since that awful message, I felt something new, hope. I walked beside her toward the door that led to the aisle. She stopped for a second, took my hand and whispered, "Thank you for coming. I know it took courage." I smiled faintly. "It takes more courage to tell the truth than to hide behind a lie. You're stronger than you think." As the doors opened, sunlight spilled in, music swelled, and I stepped back into the shadows, ready to watch the truth walk down the aisle. If you were Emma, would you reveal the truth before the ceremony or wait until after the wedding? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tae for more family drama stories that show how love can be tested and still return home. The chapel doors opened with a soft creak, and everyone turned. A wave of light flooded the aisle, scattering across white petals and golden chairs. Emma stood there fragile but steady, holding her bouquet like it was armor. Behind her I hid in the corner, unseen by most, my heart pounding like the slow beat of a drum. I hadn't seen Daniel in months, and there he was, standing at the altar, handsome in his gray suit, but his face looked older, harder, like someone who had been living inside too many lies. When he saw me, his body stiffened. His eyes widened, disbelief washing over him. He turned slightly to the best man and whispered something, but Emma kept walking, refusing to break eye contact. The music played, but the air was thick, heavy with things unspoken. Every step she took felt like a countdown to something no one else could see coming. I wanted to run to her, to tell her she didn't have to carry this alone. But maybe that's what love is. The courage to walk toward truth even when it trembles in your hands. When she reached the altar, Daniel smiled awkwardly, trying to pull her hands into his. She didn't move. Her voice was soft, but it carried through the chapel like a confession. "Before we say our vows, there's something everyone needs to know." The priest looked startled. The crowd murmured. Daniel frowned, whispering, "Emma, what are you doing?" She turned to the guests. Her eyes glistened. "Someone tried to destroy this wedding, not because of love, but because of control. And I can't walk down this aisle pretending I don't know." Every sound in the room seemed to vanish, no music, no whispers, only the sound of breathing. She took a deep breath and continued, "I was told Daniel's mother sent me cruel messages, that she hated me, that she called me names. I believed it, until this morning." I saw Daniel's expression change, confusion first, then fear. Emma opened the folder, holding up the papers. These messages were fake, created to turn a son against his own mother. A ripple moved through the guests' gasps, whispers, the rustle of silk dresses. Daniel's eyes darted from her to me. "Mom?" he whispered. I didn't speak. I just nodded slowly, tears rising but refusing to fall. Emma turned to the crowd again. "And I know who did it." She looked straight at her mother. Mrs. Hart's painted smile faltered. "Mom," Emma said quietly, "you said you were protecting me. but all you did was break a family that never meant you harm. The silence that followed was the kind that hurts too clean, too sharp. Mrs. Hart stood up, color draining from her face. "Emma, this isn't the time or place." "Yes, it is," Emma said firmly. "Because weddings are supposed to start with truth, not lies." She turned to Daniel again, her voice trembling. "Your mother never said those things. I saw the proof. She was kept away because of a lie, one that both of us believed." Daniel's lips parted, but no words came out. He looked at me again, and in that single glance, I saw 1,000 memories flash between us, scraped knees, bedtime stories, Sunday breakfasts, all the love that had been buried under doubt. He took a step toward me. Then another, and another. When he reached me, he stopped. His voice cracked. "Mom, I don't even know what to say." I smiled softly, though my hands were shaking. "Then don't say anything, son. Just remember who raised you." Iniwanabot. The priest, unsure what to do, finally said gently, "Shall we continue the ceremony?" Daniel turned to Emma, wiping his eyes. "Yes, but this time we begin clean. No secrets." The guests applauded, quietly hesitant at first, then stronger, like the sound of forgiveness being born. Even Mrs. Hart, humiliated but speechless, could only sit and watch as her daughter took back her wedding. Emma handed me her bouquet. "Would you stand with me?" she asked softly. I blinked. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "You deserve to be here more than anyone." And so, for the first time in years, I stood beside my son, not as the woman who was told to stay away, but as the mother who chose to show up. When the ceremony ended, the hall filled with light applause and quiet smiles. I didn't expect hugs or apologies, just peace, and I got it in the way Daniel squeezed my hand as we walked down the aisle together. Outside, as the guests left, Emma came to me again. "Mrs. Moore," she whispered, "thank you for not giving up on us." I smiled through tears. Love doesn't stop when someone shuts the door. It waits outside until the truth opens it again. That night, when I got home, I placed the handkerchief, his old Lucky Charm, back in the drawer. It didn't need to bring luck anymore. It had already done its job. I looked out the window at the fading sunset and whispered, "Some lies break families, but truth rebuilds them." And maybe, just maybe, that's what this day was meant for. If you were in Daniel's place, could you forgive so easily? Or would it take time to heal? Tell me what your heart says in the comments. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tae for more family drama stories that remind us. Forgiveness doesn't erase the pain, it transforms it. After the ceremony ended, the air felt lighter, like a storm had passed, leaving the ground soft but alive again. Guests moved to the garden for the reception, laughter rising over music. But my heart needed quiet. I found an empty table near the fountain, away from the chatter. For a moment, I just sat there, breathing, letting the sunlight dry the tears I hadn't realized were still on my cheeks. Then I heard his voice. "Mom, may I sit here?" It was Daniel. He stood there, hands in his pockets, looking both like the man he'd become and the boy he used to be, lost, sorry, hopeful. "Of course," I said softly. "You never have to ask." He sat across from me, eyes searching for words. The silence between us was heavy but honest, the kind that holds both regret and relief. Finally, he said, "I don't know how I let it get this far." I smiled faintly. "Because you trusted the wrong people. That's not a crime, it's a lesson." He nodded, looking down. "I saw the fake emails, Mom. I feel so stupid." "Don't," I whispered. "You weren't stupid. You were just trying to protect someone you love. That's what makes you my son." For a long moment, we didn't speak. The fountain behind us kept trickling, like time trying to wash away the hurt. Then Emma appeared, still in her gown, holding her heels in one hand and a plate of untouched cake in the other. "May I join you two?" she asked shyly. I smiled. "Always." She sat between us, her eyes red but bright. "Mrs. Moore," she said, "I should have come to you sooner. I knew something felt wrong, but I was afraid of making things worse." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Fear builds walls, truth breaks them. You were brave today." Daniel took her other hand. "I don't know how to fix what happened," he said, "but I want to start." I looked at both of them, my son and the woman who almost married a lie, and I realized something. Maybe families don't fall apart because of one big betrayal. Maybe they break slowly, from all the small silences we leave unspoken. Daniel cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology, Mom, for not calling, for believing things about you that I should have questioned, for... I raised a hand gently. Stop apologizing. Just promise me something. He leaned forward. Anything. When life gets loud, when people try to turn you against the ones who raised you, pause. Remember who stayed when no one else did. In one. He nodded, eyes wet. I will. I promise. Emma smiled through tears. Can I say something too? Of course, dear. She looked at Daniel, then at me. I know you two have your own history, but I want us to build new ones together. No secrets, no sides. Her words settled in the air like a blessing. I realized then that she wasn't just my son's bride, she was the bridge between the past and the peace I'd prayed for. Later, when the music softened and the sky turned gold, Daniel stood and held out his hand. Dance with me, Mom? I laughed quietly. Oh, Daniel, I haven't danced in years. Then let's start again. We walked to the small patch of lawn where couples were swaying slowly. His arm slipped around my shoulder like it used to when he was little. And for the first time in years, I felt weightless. People around us smiled, whispered, some even wiped their eyes. But I didn't care about the stares. This wasn't a performance. It was a reunion, one heart returning to another. As the song played, Daniel whispered, You know, Mom, I kept the house key you gave me when I left for college. I never threw it away. I looked up at him, surprised. You did? He nodded. I guess a part of me always knew I'd need to come home one day. And just like that, every wound began to close. When the song ended, applause rose softly around us. Emma came over, smiling through tears. She wrapped her arms around both of us. I think this is what weddings are supposed to feel like, she said. Not perfect, just honest. I chuckled. Honest is rare enough. Cherish it. Then Daniel turned to her, his voice gentle. Emma, there's something I'd like to do. He took the microphone from the DJ and cleared his throat. Everyone, he began, I want to make a small speech. The crowd turned. The music faded. He looked at me first. This is my mother. Some of you might have heard things about her. I believed them too easily. But today, I learned that truth takes time and courage to come home. So, Mom, thank you for never walking away. Applause filled the garden. I wanted to disappear, but my heart felt taller than ever. Emma added softly into the mic, And thank you, Mrs. Moore, for raising the man I love. I hope one day I can be half the mother you are. That night, when the lights dimmed and everyone began leaving, Daniel walked me to the gate. He hugged me for a long time, the kind of hug that says what words can't. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a guest in my own child's life. I felt like his mother again. If you were me, would you forgive so quickly? Or would you let them earn it slowly? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tae for more family drama stories. Stories that remind us that healing isn't about forgetting, it's about remembering with peace. When the music faded and the garden emptied, I stayed a moment longer beneath the string lights. They swayed gently in the evening breeze, soft golden circles dancing against the dark sky. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. Daniel had gone to say goodbye to the guests, and Emma was hugging her bridesmaids, still glowing in her white gown. I didn't want to steal a single moment from their joy. So I slipped away quietly, carrying my shoes in one hand and a heart finally lighter. The night air smelled of rain and roses. It had been a long, emotional day, but I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not the kind that comes from getting what you want, but the kind that comes from letting go. When I reached my small house, the porch light flickered on automatically. It had always been my favorite part of coming home, the way that single light greeted me, as if the house itself remembered me. I made a cup of tea, sat by the window, and looked at the little box of things I'd packed for the wedding. A handkerchief, an old photograph of Daniel's first day at school, and the invitation I never received. Strange, isn't it? We mothers keep everything not because we're sentimental, but because every object carries a heartbeat. I was about to go to bed when I heard footsteps outside. Then a gentle knock. When I opened the door, no one was there, just a small white envelope taped to the doorframe with my name written in Daniel's handwriting. My heart skipped. I tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a folded letter and a key tied with a thin red ribbon. Mom, I didn't want to give this to you in front of everyone because I wouldn't have been able to hold myself together. This is the key to the house next to ours, the one that's been empty for months. Emma and I talked, and we both agreed, we don't want our future to start without you near. You don't have to move in tomorrow. You don't even have to say yes. Just know the door is open always. Thank you for showing up when it would have been easier to stay away. You taught me what real love looks like. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady, the kind that waits outside until truth lets it in. Love, your son, Daniel. I sat down on the porch steps and read the letter again, each word trembling in my hands. The key felt warm, as if it had been waiting all this time for its rightful owner. I looked across the quiet street, imagining the little house he meant, its porch, its windows, its garden still overgrown. I could almost see myself there, planting new flowers, hanging a wind chime, waiting for them to drop by after dinner. My eyes filled, not with sadness, but with gratitude. Not every story gets a second chapter, but somehow mine did. I thought about all the nights I had sat alone, wondering if love was supposed to hurt this much. And I realized love doesn't hurt when it's real. It only hurts when it's silent. When we stop talking, stop forgiving, stop believing that one honest word can change everything. I ran my fingers over the key again, smiling. "I'll come home soon, my boy," I whispered. "Just give me a little time." Inside, the clock ticked softly. Even the house seemed to breathe easier, like it had been waiting for good news too. I poured another cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the night deepen. The moon rose high, silvering the world in forgiveness. You know, when people say a mother's love never ends, they don't mean it's endless sacrifice. They mean it's the kind of love that learns to stay, to let go, and sometimes to start again. Maybe forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. Maybe it's about remembering it without pain. And as I held that key, I knew I had found my peace. If you were in my place, would you move closer to them? Or keep your distance to protect your peace? Tell me in the comments. Sometimes, healing isn't loud. It's a quiet key left at your door. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tae for more family drama stories. Stories that remind us that forgiveness can build homes stronger than walls ever could. 2 weeks later, I stood outside the little blue house Daniel had written about in his letter. It wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms, a porch swing that needed oil, and a wild garden overrun with dandelions. But to me, it was perfect. The key he'd given me slid into the lock like it had always belonged there. When the door opened, sunlight spilled across the floorboards, dust swirling in quiet golden circles. There was a faint smell of fresh paint and new beginnings. And on the kitchen counter, I found a small note. "Welcome home, Mom. Dinner at 7. Bring your laughter." I smiled. It had been so long since anyone invited me to dinner just because they wanted me there, not out of guilt, not out of duty, but love. That evening, I stood by the mirror, brushing my hair, the silver strands catching light like threads of forgiveness. I wore a soft blue dress, simple but new, the color Emma said reminded her of calm skies. When I stepped outside, Daniel was already waiting at the fence between our houses. "Need help crossing over?" he teased. I laughed, shaking my head. "I think I can manage this distance." He smiled. That boyish grin I thought I'd lost forever. It felt like time had folded, like we were back to those days when he'd run home from school shouting, "Mom, guess what happened today?" But this time, he didn't run. He waited steady, patient the way men do when they've learned what love really means. Inside their home, the table was set with quiet care. 3 plates, 3 candles, and in the center, a bowl of roses, white and red together, like peace-meeting passion. Emma came out of the kitchen wearing an apron and the gentlest smile I'd ever seen. "I hope you're hungry," she said. I looked at the dishes, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, fresh bread. But what filled me most wasn't food. It was the sound of her calling me Mom for the first time. Dinner started with laughter, nervous at first, then free. Stories flowed between us like warm tea, small at the beginning but endless once poured. Daniel told me about his new job, his plans to fix the garage. Emma shared her dream of starting a small bakery. And I told them about my garden, how even after being left untended for years, the roses had found a way to bloom again. Maybe they just needed a little patience, Emma said. Maybe, I smiled. They needed to remember they weren't alone anymore. Halfway through dinner, Daniel grew quiet. He looked down at his plate, then back at me. "Mom, do you ever wish things had been different?" I paused. How do you answer that without reopening wounds that have just begun to heal? "I used to," I said softly. "I used to wish time could rewind, that I could fix everything I said wrong, or everything you misunderstood. But then I realized, if life hadn't broken us, we wouldn't have learned how to rebuild. He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. Emma reached for his hand. "We're learning," she whispered, and for the first time, I believed her. After dinner, Emma brought out a small cake. On top, written in frosting, were the words, "Welcome home, Mom." I laughed through my tears. "You didn't have to do this." "I'm answer." Daniel grinned. "Oh, we did. We owe you 100 dinners like this. We took pictures, real ones, not just for social media, and I realized the most beautiful photos are the ones taken when no one's posing." Later, as the night cooled, we sat on the porch with tea and the soft hum of crickets filling the silence. Daniel leaned back, eyes on the stars. "I'm glad you came," he said quietly. "Me too," I whispered. "I almost didn't." He turned to me. "What changed your mind?" I smiled, thinking of that night when Emma called. Someone needed me. And sometimes, that's all a mother needs, one reason to show up again. The porch light flickered between us, that same gentle glow that had always meant home. Emma rested her head on Daniel's shoulder. He reached over, took my hand, and said, "No matter what happens next, this is our reset. We start from love." And I believed him, because love doesn't always look like grand gestures. Sometimes it's a dinner table set for 3. Sometimes it's the sound of forgiveness clinking softly between spoons and laughter. When I went back to my own little house that night, I didn't feel separate anymore. I stood at my window, looking at their porch next door, still lit. I could hear faint music, soft voices, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to knock, because the door, the bond, the love, they were already open. I placed the key Daniel had given me on the table. It wasn't just a key to a house. It was the key to peace, the proof that even broken stories can find their ending in light. I whispered to myself, "I forgive the past, I bless the future, and I am home." If you were this mother after everything that happened, could you open your heart again so fully? Tell me in the comments. Your words might help someone heal tonight. If this ending touched you, subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tae for more family drama stories. Stories that remind us that the door to love is never truly locked. Sometimes, it's just waiting for us to turn the key. It's been 6 months since the wedding. The little blue house next door has become my favorite sound in the world. The clinking of dishes, the soft laughter through open windows, the rhythm of a new family learning to breathe together. Every morning, when I open my curtains, I can see Emma watering her plants. Sometimes she waves, sometimes she brings over a cup of coffee. And every time, I still whisper a quiet thank you to life, to truth, to second chances. The garden between our houses has changed too. What used to be wild and overgrown is now a shared space, a place where peace grows in the soil of forgiveness. Daniel built a small wooden bench right in the middle. He calls it Mom's Spot. That's where I sit every evening, watching the sunset fall across both roofs. One house old, one new. One story ending, another beginning. And in between them, me, finally at rest. A few weeks ago, Emma came to visit with a glow in her eyes I'd never seen before. She hesitated for a second, then smiled shyly. "Mom," she said softly, "we have some news." I looked at her, my heart already guessing. Her hand instinctively rested on her belly. Tears filled my eyes before she even said it. "You're going to be a grandmother," she whispered. The world stopped just for a moment. And in that pause, I felt everything. The pain, the healing, the years that had tried to break us, and the love that refused to die. Daniel joined her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. "We wanted you to be the first to know," he said. "Because this child will grow up between both our homes with open doors, not locked ones." I couldn't speak. I could only hold them both and let the tears fall freely. The garden wind carried the scent of roses, and it felt like even the flowers were celebrating. That night, I sat at my desk and took out a sheet of paper. Not to write to them, but to anyone out there who might be living their own silence. I wrote, "Dear heart that feels forgotten, maybe you're sitting alone tonight, wondering if anyone remembers you. Maybe your child hasn't called, your mother hasn't forgiven, or your family feels too far away to reach. Please believe this. Distance doesn't mean it's over. Love has a strange way of finding its way home, sometimes through a phone call, sometimes through a letter, sometimes through a bride's trembling voice saying, 'Please come.' Don't give up before your story finds its light. Sometimes all it takes is one truth spoken out loud and a door that finally opens. I folded the letter and placed it in my old diary, the same one where I'd once written, "My son doesn't want me anymore." Now, beside that old pain, I wrote new words. He came back. The next morning, I planted 3 new rose bushes, one red, one white, one pink. Red for love that endures, white for peace that follows truth, and pink for new beginnings for the little one on the way. When I finished, I sat on the bench, closed my eyes, and listened. Bird song, laughter, the hum of life continuing. Healing doesn't arrive like a thunderstorm. It tiptoes in quietly, through moments like these: a meal shared, a letter written, a garden reborn. Sometimes I think about how close I came to missing it all. How a single decision to stay home that night could have changed everything. And I realize courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "Go anyway." Maybe that's the lesson I was meant to learn. That showing up, even when you're not wanted, can rewrite the story of an entire family. One evening, Daniel brought over a small wooden frame. Inside, it was a photo of the 3 of us from the wedding night, smiling, tearful, alive. Below it, engraved in silver, were the words, "Home isn't a place, it's the people who wait for you to come back." I hung it on my wall, right above the window that faces their house. Every time I see that frame, I remember. Sometimes, love doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be patient. If someone in your family hasn't called, would you reach out first or wait for them to come? Your answer might give hope to someone watching tonight. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tae for more family drama stories. Stories that remind us that it's never too late to rebuild love, reopen doors, and let your garden bloom again. Sometimes, the people we love most will hurt us. Not because they stop loving, but because they forget how to listen. And sometimes, we'll be asked to stay away from the very moments we helped build. But love, real love, always finds its way back, even through silence, even through pride, even through pain. Tonight, as I sit by my window, I can hear laughter from the house next door. It's faint, like a memory that's learned how to breathe again. And I smile because that sound, that simple, ordinary sound, is proof that forgiveness is stronger than any wall we build. We don't need to win every argument. We don't need to be right to be loved. Sometimes we just need to show up and let truth do the rest. If you're listening to this, and there's someone in your life you miss, a mother, a son, a friend who stopped calling, maybe this is your sign. Don't wait for perfect timing. Reach out. Say something kind. You never know which word might be the key that opens the door again. Pause. Piano fades softer. Because home isn't just 4 walls. It's not where we live. It's where our hearts are finally understood. And when love returns, it doesn't knock. It just walks in and says, "I never left." If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tae for more family drama stories. Stories that remind us that no matter how far love travels, it always finds its way home.